Ah, hello, dear friends. Today we will be having a whispered exploration of the work of Jean-Michel Basquiat, one of the most influential pop artists of the 20th century. We'll explore his work through this wonderfully large tome, Boom for Real, which is taken from the Basquiat Barbican exhibition, Boom for Real, that ran in London, the Barbican Centre, from September 2017 to January 2018. I went to this exhibition, it was wonderful. Lovely exploration of his works. It's such a large book, we may take a few parts in exploring it, but here's a quote from the man himself. "I never went to art school, I just looked. That's where I think I learned about art, by looking at it." Great accessible quote there. I think there can be a little bit too much stuffiness in art about having to do X, Y, and Z to be legitimized as an artist, but actually art is in the eye of the beholder. You can see here, maybe you may recognize this quite famous iconography here, the crown that he often placed on a lot of his works, as you can see up here too. You may have seen this imagery before. There was a collaboration with H&M a little while ago. A lot of Basquiat's work on t-shirts. Here he is. I think Aaron was the name of his brother, or somebody very close to him, I think, who he looked to reference often in his work. Very effortlessly cool though. Look at that combination of the Adidas t-shirt and the suit there. Let's have a little learn of Basquiat here. The forward. Jean-Michel Basquiat is one of the most significant painters of the 20th century. His name has become synonymous with notions of cool, yet he remains a somewhat misunderstood figure, a result perhaps of individual works seldom being given the scholarly attention that they deserve. The myth takes over. Too often his exquisite paintings and drawings are divorced from the context of their making. The downtown New York scene of the late 70s and 80s, an extraordinary moment that has shaped him and that he made entirely his own. Basquiat was an artist who consumed culture voraciously and channeled all that he found relevant, socially, politically, and art historically, into paintings, drawings, objects, as well as music and performance. His own persona became a cipher, as he was driven to refashion the world around him, swept up in a creative maelstrom that has become his signature. And yet all of this action tends to be an obscure artist of fierce intelligence, poetic sensibility, and profound depth. Basquiat's Haitian Puerto Rican heritage played no small part in determining the artist that he became, and his success in the 1980s, when to receive such acclaim as a black artist was largely unheard of, was crucially made it possible for many others to follow in his footsteps. I think this is images of the scene of people working on street art at the time, and who he collaborated with, Anton Perich Basquiat at the Canal Zone Party in 1979. I think this was the time of the century where you'd have effortlessly cool artists and musicians and performance artists all getting together in underground raves and celebrating creativity in its rawest, purest form. He made a film, I believe, back in the early 80s. Here he is on the set of Downtown 81. In the autumn of 1980, Jean-Michel Basquiat was cast in the starring role of New York Beat, an independent feature film that aimed to capture the post-punk underground art scene in Lower Manhattan. He was 19 years old and had only exhibited once to date, a single work that was included in the Times Square show that June. The screenplay was written by Glenn O'Brien, famed for his music column for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, as well as his cult cable television show TV Party. Crucially, it was O'Brien who persuaded the producer Maripol and her director-boyfriend Edo Bertoglio that Basquiat, rather than Danny Rosen, had to play the lead. The story would be based on a day in the life of a down-and-out artist, enriched by a live musical soundtrack from Mud Club favourites including DNA, The Lounge Lizards and James White and the Blacks, with a few whimsical touches such as cameo appearance from Blondie's Debbie Harry as a fairy tale princess. It's what was interesting about the film, this is going on to say, is how it's an uncanny, seemingly an uncanny foretelling of the real story of Basquiat and who he became. Invitation for his first show. You'll see in a moment that he had this alter ego known as Samo, and I think a lot of his notoriety came early on where he was putting graffiti all over New York, all over Manhattan, under the title Samo, and I think a lot of the graffiti was like thought-provoking quotes, and it got a bit of a buzz going. Who is Samo? Who is this Samo? It's a painting by Francis Bacon there, Study for Portrait and Unfolding Bed. Basquiat had a poster of this work on his wall in 1979. You can see where I think you'll eventually see that a lot of his influences do look quite Francis Bacon-esque, actually. There he is outside Todd's copy shop. So that's some of the Samo graffiti that he's walking in front of on the film. This chapter is called Samo. So here's a bit of background to it. In 1978, New York was on the brink of collapse. 3 years earlier, in the midst of a financial crisis, President Gerald Ford had denied federal assistance to spare the city from bankruptcy. Violent crime in New York had doubled in preceding decade, as had car thefts and assaults, while rape and burglary had tripled and robberies had increased a startling tenfold. Bastions of middle-class life, such as the Bronx, were now nightly lit up by flames as landlords looked to dispose of buildings that they could no longer let or maintain. Even Jackie Kennedy was compelled to compose a handwritten letter to Mayor Abraham Bean, pleading, "Is it not cruel to let our city die by degrees, stripped of all her proud monuments?" It was in this context that a 17-year-old Jean-Michel Basquiat left home for good and began writing cryptic graffiti with his former City-S school classmate Alan Diaz, signed by Samo. Copyright. The city was awash with graffiti, but the tone of theirs was different. It captured the imagination of the burgeoning art world in Soho and the Lower East Side, where they focused their activity. Avant-garde slogans ranging from Samo as a conglomerate of dormant genius to "My mouth, therefore an error." Rumours were rife as to who was responsible. Here's a picture of Samo for the so-called avant-garde. A pin drops like a pungent odour. Samo for you. You can imagine, couldn't you, at a time where things are quite grim and difficult and dark, that these philosophical quotes appear around your city. Another day, another dime, hypercool, another way to kill some time. Anti-art, which is omniscient. Mickey Mouse, Samo, Sean. Samo for the sedate. Very prolific. There was art all over the city. Samo as a realization process. Samo as an end to the police. Samo for the pea-brain insect. Samo it's a gonzo as well. You can almost just, be blessed on your morning walk by a Samo. Samo is wind, mind, washed, think. Samo for the urban redneck. Samo for the phony. Samo is dead. These are excerpts from his notebooks. I feel like a citizen, it's time to go and come back a drifter. Famous Negro athletes, composite drawings. Suzanne explained the film to me. I know one day I'll turn the corner and I won't be ready for it. I was cursed from birth. Popular cheerleaders, I played their part. And often, if you knew my counterparts, a bit too bitter, naive to the point of 10 or 11, physical competition. The law of liquids, sleep sickness, the law of liquids, that thorn in my head, nagging my fists closed, victims of embellished history, the spore slowly. The editors arrested, magazine shut down. The motorcycle pulls up to the road, diner man gets off orders, a hamburger, an egg hero. We put up the fake cactus every year at this time. A proud worker comes out of the kitchen with a large bag of oats. The bus will be here in 20 minutes. Make some home fries. The kitchen boys whoop and yell and make twice as many donuts. The manager brings some colour postcards of rocks from underneath the counter by the mints and cigars. The dishwasher plugs in the jukebox and fries his wet hand with a shock. The law sits down for a free slice of pie. It's this kind of, it's just this jumbled stream of consciousness, unique view of everyday life and what's going on around him that is just so interesting. Snapshots, just like little snapshots of things that he sees and just notes and just records in a very unique way. And then his long form thoughts being influenced by these kind of staccato flashes of the world around him. Crocodile as pirate. So this is a work, spray painted an oil stick on metal panel from his private collection. Jimmy Beston is back to the sucker punch of his childhood files. Boom for real. I mean, this is Manhattan of the time. Very different place to what we know today. But where obviously a lot of art could flourish. Origin of cotton. Great images, aren't they? Really, that image by the car, the type of car it is, and the location, and the despondency, it's just That's a city of school yearbook, so these are like pamphlets that they printed off, like an interview or a story with Samo. And more paintings. Not paintings, well, paintings of his, works of his that are appearing in a kind of arty newsletter for the scene. There's Lloyd Bridges with his son Jeff Bridges, very young Jeff Bridges, at Monday's party at Studio 54 for Somebody Killed Her Husband, in which Jeff is starring. Samo graffiti bourgeois or CIA. Like all of these myths that are created by the artists in their publications. And here we move on to the New York New Wave. In February 1981, the Watershed exhibition New York New Wave opened at PS1 Institute for Art and Urban Resources, incorporated in Long Island City. Featured over 1,600 works by more than 100 celebrated and emerging artists. Basquiat was the only artist in the show to be given a prominent platform for painting. After meeting Basquiat on the dance floor in the Mud Club in 1979, Cortez became aware of his work as Samo and encouraged him to start making drawings and paintings, giving him money to buy art supplies from Pearl Paint. When he began organising the New York New Wave exhibition, Cortez invited Basquiat to take part. The artist responded with approximately 26 works using a wide range of mediums, including canvas, paper, wood, scrap metal and foam rubber. He depicted the ominous skyscraper-laden skyline of the city, complete with soaring planes and cartoon-style cars responding to the noise of Manhattan life. As Robert Farris Thompson recalled, the city of New York was his primary script. In an unconventional take on the salon-style hang, Basquiat placed the pieces at surprising heights and grouped smaller works into L-shaped configurations as if to confound viewers' expectations. The syncopated rhythm of the display was characteristic of the experimental curatorial direction of the vast exhibition, which occupied the majority of the former school building of PS1. Very prolific artist, there's a lot in his head to get out. Here are a number of shows that ended up being presented in a wave of work for him, Untitled in 1980, New York New Wave. Untitled Various, spray paint on foam rubber, and this is great, this one, Untitled, but you can see the city as canvas and just almost like what's going on in that head. You can, even though it may look like a naive artwork where it's chosen as a kind of almost childlike interpretation of the subject matter, there is something about just the jumbled nature of everything, the way in which the buildings are like smog chimneys and there is this mess of paint and distorted thoughts and cars. It's almost as if somebody's closed their eyes and tried to visually map the sounds that they hear. Here we have an untitled work here of 1981. Unlegel in 1980. You can really see, can't you, how I think what's quite difficult to convey in a book is just seeing these works artworks in person, it's almost as if somebody has lifted very heartfelt graffiti, something very personal to somebody, and put it up in a gallery. It almost feels like you're intruding on something. It's it's I suppose one of the reasons why he's so endlessly fascinating and appealing to many, because there are so many different ways of interpreting the artwork, and there are so many different ways of viewing the artwork and accessing it. It's great. This piece is dominated by 3 simply delineated heads, a motif which first appeared in Basquiat's Samo tags after he split from collaborator Al Diaz at the end of 1978. The expressionistic style of the painting with splatter marks and drips gives the viewer a sense of the speed of its creation. I think that's it as well. It's the speed of the creation. You can really feel the energy and the dynamism behind the painting process itself. The frontal flat depiction in Untitled gives the heads a haunting mask-like quality. Yes, they do. Somewhat reminiscent of Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. In 1907, a work that Basquiat was likely familiar from his frequent visits to MoMA, which drew upon African masks from the Dam region. Picasso described that work as his first exorcism painting, supposing that the African masks served to provide a magical shield against threatening spirits. And Basquiat may have viewed his heads as similarly apotropaic. I've not actually come across that word before. Apotropaic. Interesting. Here's the mention of Aaron. Scrawled beneath the left head is the name Aaron, which appears again as Aaron with a single R beneath a small crown in the middle. The name was one that Basquiat frequently employed during this period. It can be seen on other work as well as on one of his American football helmets, which he sported for performance pieces. His father, Gerard, explained that he understood Basquiat's use of the name as a reference to Hank Aaron, the acclaimed baseball player. Oh, not his brother then. At the time, he was a major player and was on the verge of breaking the Babe Ruth record. He was a very fascinating player, and Jean-Michel totally understood that. What do you think of these A's? Do you think it's a scream, a shout? Do you think it's initials? Do you think it's a typeface? A lot of ways of interpreting it, isn't there? Look, you can see that these are the ways in which this artwork is presented. You've got, it just looks so strange, doesn't it? Like these works here, which look like they should be in a warehouse somewhere, or on the side of a warehouse, or an old dilapidated building. They're all in these white box gallery spaces. It's quite something to behold. And you can see when they're all presented, there's just an absolute cacophony of sound through painting, I think, just a sheer... It's almost like, it's like a soundscape of painting. It's just, you walk in and your just senses are just over encumbered by the work. Here's that publication again, talking about the art and culture of the local region. The scene. Here's the Canal Zone party crew. On 31st of October 1978, Halloween night, the Mud Club opened its doors at 77 White Street in Tribeca. Founded by Steve Mass with curator Diego Cortez and downtown muse Anya Phillips, the venue, a loft owned by artist Ross Blegner, was intended to be a haven for the underground scene. Exhibitions were curated, films were screened, and fashion shows were staged. A roster of bands played residential DJs Johnny Dynal and Anita Zarko spun an eclectic mix of funk and punk records with a sound system set up by Brian Eno. Great composer Brian Eno. Then you had photographer Nan Golden staging her first slideshow performance here and hand-loading each image. The Mud Club, whose very name and locale announced its gritty antipathy to the glitzy Studio 54 uptown, attracted everyone from Lou Reed to Kathy Acker to Sid Vicious. Not long after it opened, People magazine described it as where New York's fly-by-night crowd of punks, posers, and the ultra-hip flaunt its manic chic. Could you imagine being there? At a time when Basquiat was making clothing, Xerox art, music, film and more, the Mud Club connected him to a community of like-minded individuals. This is it as well, right, when you painting by Fab Five, Freddy on the New York subway, TV party soup, futurist soup, tomato soup, rebellious, kind of taking a look at, stab at Warhol's work. There he is dancing at the Mud Club. We have decided the bullet must have been going very fast. I've got you under my skin, stop calling me. There's some very provocative works there, aren't they? Quite sinister. These kind of almost like baseball cards and collections of works, riffing on some of the pop culture elements of the day. Pairs dispensers, dollar bills, passport photos. By Jean-Michel Basquiat and Jennifer Stein, Ike. These collages are fantastic, aren't they? Gray at Arras, New York in 1979. Music. I mean, there are of course places that you can find this out, seek this out, this kind of culture and underground scene. Maybe it's because I'm no longer really that connected to it. I'm over the hill somewhat when it comes to exciting emerging artistic scenes, but it feels a little bit like the opportunity and the space for these kind of scenes to flourish and grow are somewhat strangled, I suppose, in how everything is increasingly clean and controlled, if you know what I mean. Feels like this kind of scene, of course, has come out of a very turbulent, difficult, dark time in New York's history. But then, and I suppose that's, reflected in its buildings and its impoverished geography, and then how people feel and are around that. These days it feels a little bit more like everything's kind of bought and paid for. You've got estates popping up everywhere. That old dilapidated warehouse is now a series of luxury flats. The spaces for artists to congregate and go. Well, that's how they move around, I suppose, isn't it? That's gentrification. Artists will move to wherever is affordable because it's a less desirable area, but then once they're all in there, they prop up an area with their artistry and vision and creativity and make it a place everybody wants to go to, and then that's when the developers swoop in and make it an area that is somewhere that everybody wants to move to, and then the artists are pushed out because of the rent and property prices going up as a result, and then the cycle continues. But I suppose there's only so many places that can happen. There's Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring. Of course, Keith Haring, another fantastic pop artist. And there's a sketch of Keith Haring in Milan by Basquiat. reading some of his little people. You may be familiar with Basquiat. Keith Haring's work, the little people and the hearts with the eyes. I mean, that's it. That's a version of the little people. This isn't a book about Haring. Maybe I'll look at some Haring work soon. But there's Debbie Harry and Andy Warhol, Basquiat, Keith Haring there, Grace Jones. Well, Madonna. Is that Madonna? Yes, that is Madonna. What a time to be alive and creating. Hollywood Africans. Fantastic colour here. Hollywood Africans in the 1940s. 7 stars. Movie star footprints. Popcorn, sugar cane. It's almost like you've got somebody with so many thoughts in their head. You just give them a topic and they've just gone off on it. They've just exploded their response and thoughts to that topic all over the page, which creates this fantastic wildfire of ideas and images. It's lovely stuff. I think that will bring us to a natural conclusion for part 1. So thank you for joining me of this exploration of Basquiat's work.